everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me all over the place at Hawk Blogger, including here on YouTube. And right now, as you can probably tell by a little bit of my backdrop, although I'm pretty backlit, I am in West Palm Beach, Florida at the NFL annual league meeting. And even as we record this episode, there are decisions getting made. Apparently, the NFL has just decided in their vote that they are going to make overtime rules the same between postseason and regular season, so that each team can possess the ball in overtime during the regular season the same way they can during the postseason. We'll also be hearing about what they decide about the Tush push. We'll be hearing about the new kickoff rule and whether they'll make changes there. There's a bunch of stuff that'll be up for discussion, and we'll hear that as it comes out. Most of this show will not be about those rule changes, though. Make sure you give the show a like and subscribe. Click the bell to get notified. As you can tell, you never know exactly when I'm going to go live with the show, and that's the best way to stay in touch. But I'm going to start by just giving you a little bit of an insight into the banquet that happened last night, which was quite an experience. I won't probably go into too much detail because I think it's intentionally meant to be a private event, but it was a pretty cool experience, and I know you guys like hearing about that stuff. And then the bulk of the show is going to be about Mike Macdonald breakfast, the coach's breakfast that we just had a little bit ago. I've got video to share with you about that conversation, a lot of great questions, a lot of great answers from Mike Macdonald, some pretty illuminating ones. There's a lot to get to there, so I want to get to it pretty quickly because after this, I've got some plans to hopefully spend the rest of my time here in Florida well before I have to fly back to Seattle later today. So, last night, where do I start? I mean, I hope I am able to maintain like the sense of appreciation for what I'm getting to experience here, and that it is special and it's unique and it's different, because last night was a lot of fun. I mean, you walk in there and, I'm still happy when I get to see, Seahawks personnel, people that work behind the scenes and write stories or do video production. I'm happy when I get to see, John Schneider, Mike Macdonald, all those folks. I literally, when I was getting in line to get in, I looked up and literally two people in front of me was Mike Macdonald and his wife Stephanie, and we chatted for a bit, and I always, as much as I think a lot of people see folks in these positions as kind of celebrity of some sort, like you want to get a selfie or whatever, that kind of thing, I'll always just see people as humans. And so my first thought is, man, I bet getting out for a night, the two of them, to a nice evening when you've got a 4-month-old baby or however old Jack is, it's got to be nice. And so that's what we talked about. We didn't talk about anything else. We just talked about, childcare and being able to spend the night out together and enjoy some time as adults. So, that was the start of the evening. And then it was really, really well organized by the NFL, obviously good food, good drink. And it was a very large, set of rooms that you could kind of wander through, and different people are in different rooms, and I don't know how you all are with schmoozing or networking or whatever you want to call it. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but, I got some food and a drink, and like most of the people I know hadn't arrived yet. So I just walked up to one of the standing tables. There was a little spot, and I asked if I could join, and did, and ended up talking with two guys that had done work with the NFL for, 20, 25 years. One of the guys happened to be a former tight end in the NFL, and he was there when Pete Carroll was there as the defensive backs coach with the Jets. And he told me this story about he had been traded, And the way of the world is like essentially like you're told you pack your bags and you leave. And as he was being given this information, he was told that Pete Carroll wanted to see him, and he was like, I'm a tight end. Like, why does the defensive back coach want to see me? And he was told, well, Pete wants to give you a chance to say goodbye to the guys. And he's like, my tight end coach didn't even let me do that. But that's just who Pete always has been. And I thought was a really great little anecdote to reinforce again why Pete is one of a kind. And it's funny because you'd think that would be the type of thing that everybody would do, but it's just there's a harsh side of this business for sure, and that's not the case everywhere. And then the only other thing, I mean, there's a lot more to the evening. I wish I could share more, but I'm not generally a starstruck person. It's just not something that hits me too much. But I turned around and I saw Serena Williams walk by, and I was like, whoa, like what's going on? I'd forgotten that she and Caitlin Clark and some other folks had been here the previous day for a panel discussion, I think, on flag football. And I did not see Caitlin Clark. I don't think she was there. She probably had somewhere else she had to be. But I'm not even a big tennis fan. But Serena Williams, man, she is a presence. She walked in and everybody was kind of buzzing about her presence there and her being there. And I don't know that there's that many people that I've seen in person that even, I mean, I obviously followed her career a little bit, but I wasn't some huge fan, but she commands attention in a room. It was pretty cool. So that was cool, but there was a lot of other great conversations, great time. Had a chance to meet wives and family members, and they had a whole like kids room set up where they had hermit crab races going on, and the hermit crabs, their shells were all NFL helmets. And I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure Chuck Arnold has a video of a Seahawk hermit crab scoring a touchdown. So that exists out in the world in case you needed to know that. All right, so let's get to the Mike Macdonald stuff, because honestly, there's so much sound. I don't know if I'll even get to all of it today. I might not, just because there's so much to get to. But let's start, since I kind of shared some of the personal stuff, let's start with some of the personal aspects I asked about with Mike Macdonald this morning, because I mean, I think it's worth getting to know him and getting to know how he thinks about stuff outside of football. And so the first question I asked him was, you're here with all these coaches. What do you guys talk about? Good. So when you talk to other coaches here, how much of it's about football? How much of it's not?
I'm not the most dynamic personality with all these ranging interests. So most of them are about football. Just there's a lot of shared experiences, and there's only so many of us that had the opportunity to do this. So good conversations. Keep it light. Sometimes there's some scrimmaging going back and forth, and those are fun too. So, but yeah, a lot of respect for these guys. There's a lot of great coaches in the league.
I know it's. I thought it was interesting just hearing him be a little bit self-deprecating there about how dynamic of a personality he is. That he doesn't have a lot of interests outside of football. And when he talked about scrimmaging, I was kind of curious. I didn't follow up on what that meant, but I assume that they're kind of going back and forth on, if I did this, what would you do? And things of that nature. But that was kind of fun to hear. I also asked him, because we had talked last night, and I just know he's a big golfer. And so wanted to ask him about golfing here. And here's his answer on that. I know you like golf, and you've gotten out with any of the coaches here. Who's the best stick?
Well, apparently there used to be the coaches got together to play golf. They don't do that anymore, so maybe we got to bring that back. But right now, I will not take my game against whoever's out there. But yeah, it's fun to get out there. We get out there earlier in the week, and it's obviously great just to be outside and playing a great game we love and competing. But yeah, we got to get that game back.
What's it like having family members here? How does that change kind of the tenor of the event?
it was great. Steph's here. Steph's folks are here. Jack's here. It's pretty cool. And then, they had the family set up last night at the event with a bunch of kids running around. And, yeah, it's just awesome. So it's just like, again, this is a time where we all kind of share the experience together and have a respect for, like, what people's roles are to make this whole thing go, media included. And so it's great just being in a setting where we're a little bit more relaxed and working on the game we love to kind of push it forward. But when the family's involved, it's definitely makes it special.
So I know someone noticed I had been prepping for the show and I had the speed higher so I could get all the time codes on. So I think I set it back to the normal speed. Hopefully that he doesn't sound like a chipmunk as much anymore. But yeah, I mean, I think, just getting a feel for how Mike thinks about things outside of just the game and the personal side of stuff. I'll ask, there's just some folks in chat who are talking about Serena Williams. Let's bring it back to football and let's keep like disparaging comments out of chat, like in general. This is meant to be a positive show in most cases and a positive community. So, if you have bad things to say about somebody, keep them to yourself. It'd be my preference. And I appreciate you guys. Speaking of getting back to football, there's been a lot of conversation about the offense, and I wrote an article on hawkblogger.com a couple days ago on the flight over about the defense. And so I wanted to ask Mike Macdonald about that defense and about, hey, with all these changes, how do you feel like things might be on defense where you haven't had as many changes? And here's what Mike Macdonald said.
There's so much change on offense, a lot of talk on offense, offensive coaches, offensive players. What about the defense? You guys, were top 10 last year in a lot of categories. What do you imagine or what are you envisioning could be a step in year 2 for your defense?
Yeah, I felt like we ended the year with some pretty good momentum. So the expectation is that we take advantage of that and build on those things. Where you want the year to be like starting now. You want to be like this the whole time and just be rocking and rolling come December, January, February, where you can eliminate some of those those experiences and those times. So you're gonna hit some speed bumps along the way, but make it more seamless in terms of how we grow it. But understanding that there's a lot of expectation on that side and we have really high standards. So let's go pedal to the metal, make sure we're beating all those things. That was the case last.
So that was Mike Macdonald talking about the defense. I wanted to ask him also about DeMarcus Lawrence, because honestly, I don't think we've really heard from him yet about how he expects DeMarcus Lawrence to affect the defense and the role that he wants him to play. Here was the coach talking about his new edge rusher.
Yeah, I'm really excited about him. I think he complements our room really well. AD's he'll get a laugh if he hears this, but he has a heck of a 6 technique. Leslie Frazier, shout out to him. That's a constant battle in the office, but just a disruptor. Can kind of play the way we want to play technique-wise, but also, like I said, this guy's really, really smart on what sets tell you, what blocks am I going to get. Being able to create more negative plays on early downs to get us in some of those advantageous defensive situations are really going to help us. And then obviously the pass rush element too, complementing Chen, Boye, and all those guys, moving them up and down the line like we do, like we like to move guys around. So it fits right in.
He's had some good sack years, but he is.
So I thought it was interesting hearing him talk about DeMarcus Lawrence and some of the things he brings that aren't just the physical and production side of that, but just the knowledge of how he understands what offenses are trying to do. He's smart enough to, the conversation he has a little bit later is he can recognize play action and know that his job is just to beat this one guy. He knows when to take chances. And the fact that he knows all that presents opportunity for him to help share that information with other guys on the Seahawks, Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, that are growing and learning in the league still. So we may look back in a few years and have conversations with Boye Mafe and Derek Hall about how DeMarcus Lawrence helped them reach potential that they wouldn't have otherwise reached. So I think that's still going to be a sneaky good signing for the Seahawks. And cool to hear Mike Macdonald talk about it. Obviously, Aden Dirty, AD, as he will always refer to him, has a very clear idea of how he wants to use him. We didn't follow up on what the six technique, debate is with Leslie Frazier and AD and all that kind of stuff. But obviously those guys are all defensive minded coaches, clearly having discussion quite a lot on that side of the ball. There's a lot of firepower on the defensive coaching side, and not that that's new news, but it's just a good reminder that that's the case. Next clip I wanted to play for you is about Josh Jobe. I've been curious if this is a guy that Mike has as the clear, starter, or whether they want to add more competition to that spot. This was what the coach said about that.
Yeah, I'm looking at Jeff, but a wise man once said you can never have too many corners, and might be Ozzie Newsome that said that, and he's right. So like we need to create more competition in the defensive back room, especially a corner. Josh knows that when he signed up, but really, really excited about Josh, just taking his career to the next level and how he competes. I think one thing that Josh does such a great job of is just like the day in, day out process, how he approached his job, his responsibilities, how he studied. Him and Spoon work really well together. So that's the type of like energy we talked about that we need this offseason in the room so we can sharpen each other and be able to put a heck of a group out there. But he's going to be a big part of what we're doing.
So that is Coach talking about Josh Jobe. He went on a little bit in that answer, and I thought it was a little revealing that he spent that much time talking about the fact that they do want to add competition to that room, and that Josh Jobe signed knowing that they want to add competition to that room. I think that cornerback is a bigger area of potential draft utilization than we've been thinking it is. I mean, all along I thought that they would want to add corner to that corner, competition and corner draft picks. I've generally been thinking that would be later in the draft, but who knows? Like, we know on very good information that the Seahawks were pretty high on Cooper DeJean last year. I think Terry and Arnold as well. But Cooper DeJean specifically, they didn't end up taking him. He obviously ended up being a very good player for the Eagles. They had roughly the same personnel last year that they do this year. So obviously Jobe has solidified himself as a player that they can put out there. But you notice he also didn't mention Nehemiah Pritchett, which is honestly good news from my perspective, because I just didn't think he was demonstrating enough to be safe on the roster, let alone be getting a lot of reps. So the fact that his name didn't pop to the coach's head maybe indicates something similar. At the very least, I think keep an eye out for that position being a one that they will look to add to. Similarly, there's a comment about, or a conversation about, safety and the third safety role. And this was pretty interesting as well. I think this question came from John Boyle, and really talking about initially DeAnthony Bell, who they signed from Cleveland, and whether he can fit into the third safety role. But listen to what Mike Macdonald says about three safeties and that kind of personnel package in general.
That can do kind of third safety stuff.
Yeah. Really excited about him. I know he's got a lot previous relationships with some of the guys on staff, like Jeff Howard, and they love him. And the tape shows it. His enthusiasm shows it. So he's gonna fit in just right with us. And again, the three safety stuff, I think that's because we had three great safeties. So hey, let's figure out a way to get these guys on the field at the same time. So they earn that, those opportunities, and if they go earn them, then we'll figure out a way to get them out there.
So that's That's a little different than, where you need to fill that third safety role. That was Macdonald acknowledging that they had three talented safeties last year in Rayshon Jenkins and Kobe Bryant and Julian Love. And so they went with what the strength of the personnel groups were. Doesn't sound like he's assuming that they're going to use three safeties as much as they did last year. That could mean that safety is a less likely selection for the Seahawks this year. So, those of us who are big Nick Emenwari fans, or I know there's folks that are Malachi Starks fans, there's folks that are Andrew Makuba fans, Kevin Winston Jr. Like, there's a lot of interesting safeties potentially for the Seahawks. I don't know that they're definitely going to add to that room in the draft. I think they will, but that was a little bit different than I expected to hear from Mike Macdonald on the safety position, and something to kind of monitor as we get closer to the draft. Another position that we know that they need to address is nose tackle. And while that's not the most exciting position on the roster, like, if you want to have a good defense, it's a pretty key part, especially of this scheme. And so here is Mike Macdonald answering, I think it was Brady Henderson's question about the nose tackle position.
Well, I think we can play right now and we're rolling. A guy that can say like primary A gap player is important to this defense. So however that manifests itself is could be someone we acquire or draft. Could be kind of a role type of deal where we divvy it up to the guys we have on the team. But Murph can play in there, Jay Reed can play in there, Lee can do that in spots. But we'd love someone to emerge as a primary A gap guy for us.
So there you have Macdonald talking about that they've got guys that can kind of fill that role in Byron Murphy and Jaron Reed, and he said Leonard Williams can do it in spots, but they'd like someone to get that role and own it. He talked about they could acquire somebody, draft, whatever. I still think Calais Campbell is a name that would be the ideal get, because he at least is someone can fill that role this year, and also a great leader, could also add to that room as well. And still, even at his really advanced age, was essentially the best run defending defensive lineman in the NFL last year by a long way. So I think he'd be ideal if they could figure out how to convince him to come to Seattle. If that's not possible, then I think the draft is a highly likely place that they'll look to add to that position. And I don't know when in the draft. John Schneider doesn't tend to draft nose tackles early, especially if they're primarily run stuffers. But, you didn't hear him mention Cam Young. You didn't hear him mention Quinton Boana, or any of the other guys that they've had kind of on the roster doing that role. So I still think nose tackle is, my read of that, higher area of focus for the draft than maybe it had been. But I always assumed that was a position that they wanted to address. It's just a question of how high in the draft they're willing to spend capital to do it. But you heard him talk about how important that position is. I think that has not changed. Last thing, kind of on the defensive side, was Michael Sean Dugar, who, by the way, I think stole the show today with his questions. A bunch of great questions. I'm going to play some of the other questions he asked in a bit, but he asked about Reek Woolen and about how to get the most out of his cornerback. And here was Mike Macdonald's answer about Reek Woolen.
He sat right here. He just tell you play to play focus on just all the just kind of the checklist of what you need to do, play in, play out. But Reek had a heck of an offseason last year, and I'm really excited about him. So we all know what his strengths are, but when he's at his best, he really unlocks our defense because he takes away a side of the field. We can push coverage away from him. So really excited about it, But we have to work together, him and us as a coaching staff, make it come to life every day, and then that's when the best version of him comes alive.
One more thing on that. This is Mike Dugar asking, are they confident that you can get that out of Reek?
Confident you can get that from him?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's our job, man. That's why we get paid.
So, Mike Macdonald, feeling confident that they will get the best version of Riq Woolen, talking about the fact that he had a big offseason last offseason, and he did. He came back with, more muscle, more strength, and he was more durable last year. And I thought a better player. But there's still things to be addressed, and you heard him talk about that focus is still the number one thing, play in, play out. I think that primarily comes in zone defenses where he's not just locked on the guy in front of him and mirroring his movements. He's one of the best man cover corners, press man cover corners in the NFL, one of the top 5 at the worst, one of the top 2 at the best. So but you play a lot of zone, and zone is a different kind of coverage, different kind of defense, different kind of skill set. And those are some of the situations where Riq Woolen is, to use the coach's phrase, lost a little bit of focus when he's been made some of his mistakes. So that's kind of the defense. A lot of conversation there, which I think was good because we haven't talked as much about that this offseason. But there was also some conversation about the offense, and Michael Sean asked a good question here about, after these changes, do you feel like your offense has improved? And here's what the coach had to say.
I think it's different. I mean, we have a long way to go. So we have different players in the building, and we're really excited about those guys. But as a football team, we have to do a great job throughout the offseason program of installing our process again, not skipping steps, being connected as a football team, doing all the things the right way. So we hit the ground running in September. But it's hard to you can't evaluate where we are in terms of last year. There's so many different pieces.
Josh Jobe.
So, you get the coach, I think, punting on that question a little bit. It's kind of how the energy I got from his response was, if I was reading between the lines, this is just my interpretation, it's not what he actually said, was no, not necessarily. We haven't improved. And with that in mind, I'm going to not say that, but what I am going to say is that doesn't mean we won't improve, and it doesn't mean that we won't be better, and we've got a long way to go. We've got the draft, we've got, install, we've got the coaches who are going to work with them and develop, and, we'll see how this all comes together. There's no coach that's going to be like, oh no, we're definitely worse. That's not going to be the answer ever. And I kind of, my instinct from that was his default answer in his head is we are not as good as we were on offense, and we've got ground to make up. That's kind of how I interpreted what he said. And I think he's right. Whether that's what he meant or not, I think that's the reality. I don't know how you can legitimately look at the skill sets of the quarterback and the wide receiver position and say that they've clearly improved. I think I think you have to really have hated Geno Smith and or hated DK Metcalf to believe that that's true, and maybe had a little bit of a blind eye to what both of those guys brought to the team. Or maybe you just look at stats, and look at Sam Darnold's stats and say he's better than Geno Smith. We won't go back over that all over again, although we'll probably talk about it a million times between now and the season. But yeah, I don't know that the team believes that they've gotten better on offense yet. I also don't believe that they think that that's a permanent state of affairs. And as I've talked to you all about, I'm not convinced that this won't be I don't know if significantly better offense, but if they were like the 18th overall offense last year, can they be a top 12 offense this year? I believe they can be. I really do. It's going to be a riskier road to get there, but I do believe that's a realistic outcome. So kind of related to that, I asked him about the draft picks that they've got, and you've got 5 picks in the top 90, and Do you find yourself as a defensive-minded head coach like wanting to spend those picks on defense, or do you want to pick on offense? Like, have you thought about that now that you're looking at what's going on with your roster?
Well, I think we're in a great spot where there's a balance where we can really feel like we can attack the best player available. So if that person's on defense and we're really excited about him, we have a great vision for him, then let's rock and roll. Let's go get him and make, and see how he fits in and let him go compete and let's go. But that's the case on offense as well. You don't have to take a guy at a certain position. I think actually you get in trouble when you do that sometimes. So there's a lot of great players in this draft. I think there's a lot of kind of goes like across positions and really like over the course of the first couple rounds. So we're sitting in a great spot to make our team significantly better. So it'll be fun to see how it shakes out. But if you get caught chasing positions and hey, we only got like a couple players here, or for the same token, hey, we're good here. Like we're good at this position. Let's not take this guy. Been burned by that a few times in my career and just learned my lesson. So we won't operate like that.
I loved that from Macdonald. He said that to me before. He said that to other folks before. This notion of it, even if we're already strong at a position group, that doesn't necessarily mean we should just pass on a really good player. And that has implications for the pick at 18. That has implications for a name like Jihad Campbell at linebacker. It has implications for a player like Nick Emenwari at safety. It has implications for whomever might fall to them that they feel like is a really good player. And I'm not going to play the sound, but Brady Henderson asked at one point, like, with you having added Sam Darnold and you already having Sam Howell, do you still feel like there's room to draft a young quarterback? And he says, yeah. And he said, but that's no different than I'll probably answer any year. Like, I always think you should be looking to add, to the quarterback room. So in any event, I thought that was good to hear from the coach. But there's a lot of conversation kind of about leadership that was interesting. And let me kind of play. I thought the best exchange of the of the meeting, or whatever you want to call it, the breakfast, even though there's no food. Mike Dugar kind of, for me, it was really impressive. He asked kind of the hard question, which doesn't always get asked, and it's uncomfortable to ask. But he talked about the fact that DK Metcalf had gone on the Get Got pod with Marshawn Lynch and Michael Robinson and said that they felt like outsiders. And he goes on to talk about, the specific example of, DK Metcalf saying he used to try to help contribute to play calling or to game planning, and then feeling like he was unheard and screaming into the headset at Ryan Grubb. So I want you to listen to this whole exchange and watch Mike Macdonald's reaction and how Mike Macdonald answers what I think was a very tough but a fair question to ask for, from one of the best guys on the beat doing it. So here's Coach's response, and here's the exchange between him and Mike Dugar.
Christian Pete staffs in the room. Yeah. Specifically, he mentioned Jay Reed, Tyler, Gino, Jay Mai, and Mike Dixon. He said they felt like outsiders within the culture. Is that something that he ever expressed to you?
No, we never talked about that. Yes. I'm not sure what he's talking about, honestly.
He actually gave an example. He said he and Tyler used to contribute to the QB or the offensive meetings installed. They would watch film on DB, say, hey, I played this guy. He likes to bite on this route, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Said I think he relayed that information to like the Niners game, for instance. He felt unheard, and that's why he screamed at Grubb, during the Niners game on Thursday Night Football. He never brought up anything?
I may or may not remember that in the game. Look, it's a tough situation, right? Because everyone has their experience about what happened throughout the course of last year in all phases, right? I'm not gonna say like that's his experience wasn't what he felt in that time. But look, we're not gonna be perfect in how we operate, but our players opinions, how they operate, what's important to them, that's always going to be really important to us. They're the ones who've got to do it. They're the ones who drive the bus. It's our job to help it make it come to life. We fell short in that sometimes last year, probably more so than we wanted to. But I think if you get a real good feel for the locker room about how well we take guys' input and value their opinions, I think you're going to get an overwhelming majority of guys saying that they feel heard and valued. And it's an unfortunate situation that he felt that way for that time. But you got great players like that. Of course, you're going to do your best to make it come to life and let their opinions be heard.
That's pretty powerful stuff, I think. And Mike Macdonald handled that like a pro. I don't know if he would be able to answer that deftly last year in his first, few months on the job if something like that had happened. But it was an absolutely valid question for Mike Dugar to ask. And then you kind of saw Mike Macdonald smile and kind of say, like, no, we never talked about them feeling like outsiders. And I think he was hoping that was the end of the conversation. And Mike Dugar followed up with a specific example, which was really like a pro move. And I think you kind of see Mike Macdonald not necessarily thrilled that this was going to continue and not knowing necessarily where it was going to go. And saying, I think he really handled it well in that he kind of joked about the Ryan Grubb moment that he remembers it, and also did not directly contradict DK Metcalf. Just was like, hey, that's his lived experience. And I'm not going to say that he shouldn't feel the way he felt. Like, he's entitled to how he feels and about that moment. But also was steadfast in the fact that he feels pretty good about how much players on the team are heard and would tell you that they feel heard, are involved in the conversation. And keep in mind, the NFL Players Association asks players in each team to grade all sorts of things about the team that they're on. And Mike Macdonald was one of a handful of coaches that got an A as the coach. So I don't think it's as widespread as DK. Like, I don't know that DK even made it sound widespread, but the implication of what DK Metcalf said on that podcast was that this was just a team of coaches that don't listen to their players. I think there's evidence to the contrary. And I think Mike Macdonald feels comfortable that there's evidence to the contrary. But he also was open about, hey, like, we weren't perfect. We probably fell down on that more than I would have wanted us to. But, that's something we're going to continue to work on. So, heck of an answer. Heck of a question. Really, really cool to watch that kind of unfold right next to me. I did ask the coach about leadership in general because, I relayed a story about Pete Carroll's second year and how he had to kind of coax Cam Chancellor into being a leader. And so let me make sure I've got that queued up here. Sorry, you're seeing me look down. I don't have my normal setup, so I'm having to look at my notes and my time codes. But here's what Coach said. I think you're going to hear me ask the question and set it up about the Cam Chancellor thing and about leaders on the team this year.
There's a point back in Pete Carroll's second year where he had to have a conversation with Cam Chancellor in his second year as well to kind of step forward as a leader. Are you imagining you're going to have some guys that you're going to want to tap and talk to about their role as leaders on the team?
Yeah. I mean, those are ongoing conversations. I mean, as I'm listening to your question, I'm thinking of guys that we worked with last year to, hey, let's take our game to the next level. Everyone's on a different, part of their career journey. So you're thinking of Devin Witherspoon, his, where he was in his career versus a Leonard Williams. Well, both of those guys are guys that I felt like really took their leadership growth to the next level last year, and how they approached the game, how they led their teammates in their own distinct way. Kobe Bryant's a guy that comes to mind that's going to do that. It'd be fun to see along the offensive line who kind of steps up in one of those roles. But you never want to like push the envelope. You always want to make it, their own style and make them comfortable doing it and give them the confidence to do that. But yeah, that happens all the time.
I know
You heard him talk there about the fact that is something that he's got guys he's kind of looking forward to seeing with Devin Witherspoon, Leonard Williams, guys he already mentioned that I think already have some of that role. Witherspoon's kind of the guy in my mind that is the Cam Chancellor. He's not necessarily as reluctant as Cam Chancellor seemed to be early on in his career to speaking up. But I think there's another level. Like the guy that I would expect to replace DK Metcalf in his weekly press responsibilities as like one of the leaders and stars of the team is Devin Witherspoon. I might be wrong, but that's the first name that came to mind to me. And part of that is representing his teammates in a way that's a little different than he had to last year. He's been able to be the young guy, lead by example, but maybe not say as much. I think that could change in this situation with a little bit of a void in that locker room. I also think Ernest Jones is another guy, obviously, and he's talked about him as well. But then you also heard him mention the offensive line, and that he's looking forward to seeing who kind of emerges in that room. And they clearly didn't get the veteran at this point to be that voice. So somebody's going to have to step up. I've seen Charles Cross try to do it. We'll see if Abe Lucas, we'll just see. Olu Timmy, who knows who that will be. But there may be somebody else that steps up as well. Related to the leadership stuff, I also asked, there's all these conversation, about players for good reason, but part of the head coach's responsibility is also to develop other coaches and on his staff. And so this was a question I asked about developing defensive coaches, and I specifically called out Aden Dirty.
It's a great question. I mean, that's really important to us, is giving our guys opportunity to grow and take their careers to the next level. I think, again, just AD and I's relationship has just grown consistently since we met each other and started working together. And he's doing a great job. So he's leading the troops, organizing all the things. I mean, just having a really great understanding of what we're trying to achieve. And then when both of us work together and the rest of our staff, I think it's really cool, and some of the things that come up, it's not just my idea and how we want to do it this year. Guys have different inputs of, hey, how can we attack this thing from different angles, getting people's like personal style, personal spins on stuff, which is really cool. And so really the whole staff, but it's really important to build kind of the energy and the program in the building where your guys have opportunities to take on projects, get in front of the team. So I'm excited about that this year. Guys will have more opportunity to kind of shine in front of the guys, and it'll be a lot of fun.
You could just tell the chemistry between Macdonald and Aden Dirty is just really, really blossomed last year, and I think very different than what I think was happening on the offensive side of the ball, as we saw with Ryan Grubb. But, there's a lot of mutual respect there. I think Mike Macdonald's ability to develop and grow Aden Dirty is going to be a big part of how this team grows. I think Aden Dirty is a guy that, if this defense does what I hope it will do, I think Aden Dirty is going to be a head coaching candidate at some point. He's got that kind of presence, and he's got a really interesting background. And so we'll see. We'll see. Like we saw that the 49ers, year after year, were having their defensive coaches getting hired as head coaches elsewhere. I think that could end up starting to be the situation in Seattle, where you have some of those coordinators starting to, the defensive guys starting to get groomed by Mike and potentially getting hired elsewhere. Most likely they'll probably be hired as just DCs somewhere else first, because they will want play calling responsibilities. But we'll see. I think Aden Dirty is a unique name in all this, because I think he's got such a high ceiling as a coach in general. All right, last thing I'm going to play for you guys from the Mike Macdonald conversation is his perspective on the Tush push and whether or not that should be banned. This is a conversation. Maybe it's already been decided by the time I will have played this, but wanted to share the coach's thought on that play.
I I think it's a good play. I understand the positions people have with the security or the health and safety of it. The problem, like the question of the matter is like if there would be an injury, the severity of the injury that's at play, and you never want to put your players at that type of risk. So that's something that you have to kind of measure against any other football play that you see on a normal basis. But it seems to me like there's enough plays where we feel like that isn't the case right now, and so I think it's a good play, and you got to defend it, and then maybe we'll execute it one day.
So word is that has been tabled for now at the league meetings. Not super surprised about that. Could be brought back up later, but interesting to hear from a defensive-minded head coach that he thinks it's a good play and doesn't have a problem with it, and also talks about wanting to execute it. Interesting. I wonder who they'd execute it with, and do they have that player on the roster? And is it John Rice Plumlee? Is it, who knows? Like, I'm kind of curious about where that will go. That was my major takeaway from that, is that he'd like to be able to use that play, and so he doesn't want to take it away. And as far as defending it, I think most defensive coordinators never think that there's a play that has no defense against it. So not super shocked there. So a lot of good stuff from Mike Macdonald. There'll be the full press conference. I'm sure the Seahawks will post it at some point. It wasn't really a press conference, but I think they will post it on their channel. So, I might have some other clips I play from it at other times, but I thought a pretty good conversation, some things that stood out to me, and I think we learned a lot on the defensive side. I think the nose tackle piece is interesting. I think the Josh Jobe and cornerback piece is interesting. I think the 3 safety piece is interesting. And I also, like I said, the best exchange for me was the conversation between the question from Mike Dugar about the DK Metcalf situation, what he said on the Get Got pod, and how Mike handled that. That was A+ stuff from both of those guys. And so, we're learning more about the coach in his second year. I think he's more comfortable in his own skin, as you'd expect him to be after getting through that first year. And now we see, like, next step is the draft, and then rookie mini camp, and OTAs, and all that stuff will just be piling towards them. And Clint Kubiak will get his first chance to get his hands on his players. John Benton will get his first chance. We'll see who's like on the roster for the offensive line. We heard from John Schneider yesterday. If you didn't hear that show, make sure you go back and listen to the John Schneider show I did yesterday. You're not going to get that sound anywhere else. And John Schneider, I thought, gave some really interesting answers to questions I asked yesterday. So make sure you listen to that. But, he talked about trades being something that happens after the draft. That's when cap casualties could happen. So in the weeks following the draft, that's when there could be some additional moves made, and we'll see. If you're holding out for a Wyatt Teller trade from the Browns to play guard, that's the time frame to target. It's not going to be right now. It's not going to probably be before the draft. So lots of information. I'm really glad I came. I appreciate you guys all helping to make it possible for me to come. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the show. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, click the bell to get notified when I go live. Also, join up as a Patreon member, patreon.com/hawkblogger. The audio versions of all this show are available there. They're also, we're still working through it, but they're available for everybody right now. Wherever you get your podcast, you can get the audio version of this show every single day. And Patreon members are always going to have an ad-free version, but in the next few weeks, the version that's available to everybody, even folks who are not a Patreon member, will start having ads in it, which is just what it is. I gotta make money somehow. But if you want to always get ad-free audio, patreon.com/hawkblogger, you will always get ad-free audio. If you do listen to this podcast on whatever podcasting platform, Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever, I would really appreciate a 5-star review. If you don't want to give it a 5-star, let me know before you give it a review that's lower than 5-star. What you'd want to see change. Maybe I can make those changes, because I'd really love to see as many 5-star reviews as possible. It really, really helps. Obviously, it takes you nothing but a second to do it. So if you're listening, please take a moment, especially on the Apple Podcasts, and give a 5-star review. I'd really, really appreciate it. All right. I am going to wrap up. I've got some other stuff I'm going to try to get done before I head back to Seattle. Tomorrow morning, folks, it's finally going to happen. At least, knock on wood. Jalen Noel, the talented wide receiver who the Seahawks have met with multiple times, will be on my show tomorrow for an interview. Looking forward to talking to him. I am hoping to bring on Ty Felton, another wide receiver from Maryland, later this week. And then I believe I think I have another person potentially lined up for Friday. A lot of great stuff coming your way on Hawk Blogger Morning. So make sure you're tuned in. We're going to keep these things rolling, and really appreciate sharing with all you and what you guys bring to the table. I do not see any super chats, so I think we're free to wrap up here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. Until then, I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings.